to this webinar. My name is Kapil Puri. I am an ITR and I am your host for this session. Welcome to this webinar on reuse and readaptation of heritage buildings. Today we have a lot of eminent panelists. And before I introduce you to the panelists, let me introduce you to our Vikpul Vashne is a master's in urban planning and an architect and urban planner. She had been also design chair Integral University Lucknow. She has excelled in designing and executing some of India's renowned projects like settlement of earthquake stricken Bhuj to designing and modernizing many Indian airports, from designing highest altitude airports of India, Leh, and also malls for the urban rich to a low cost housing township for NPCIL at Banswara. A winner of coveted awards like UP Ratn 2013, Shakti Samman 2015 from Governor of UP, Heritage Award from UP government, to name a few. With the expertise in institutional buildings of national importance and a passion for heritage, in addition, she has also authored 4 coffee table books on Lucknow's heritage. Lucknow, a treasure encompassing the grandeur and heritage of Lucknow and cultural legacy of Lucknow. So, ma'am, welcome on board. Welcome to the panel, and we look forward.
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, respected panelists, the audience, and of course, the organizers who have made an effort to talk about heritage last in the priority of the development projects. It's not good to say, but that's the reality. India is a developing country, and still, after 70 years of independence, it is almost sort of last in the priority list of planners and whatever the plans of the government. So now, good thoughts put forward by Dr. Sarkar and lot of brainstorming can be taken forward by the points put forward by him. Now, as I feel, he had put forward restoration versus readaptation was also one of his points. So, some thoughts from my side about why readaptation and restoration, of course, is important, but why readaptation? Now, India is a developing country, as we all know, and government has definite number of protected monuments or buildings through his agency ASI or state agencies, state ASIs. Still, there are number of unprotected buildings scattered all over the country. Now, what do we do? How as a community, as a society, as denizens, where you may call NGOs or whatever, in whatever language, technical terminology we may put in, how to conserve them, how to protect them, how to prolong their life for our future generations. Now, that's where I come, I put this point. The city is alive when it is evolved. It evolves. It should always evolve. And it is dead when it's embalmed. I put in my FB post also, but I like this phrase. It's by a very famous heritage expert. So I believe in this point because the heritage buildings, if you are not making them evolve, we do not respect them. We do not honor them. Why? Because they are not proving their potential to the contemporary needs of the society. To cater to the contemporary needs, they have to evolve, and we should rather assist them to cater to our present need. That's one viewpoint. And we see these cities all over Europe, whether you see Venice or Dresden in Germany. Why do we like them? Why do we, they are so picturesque, they're so beautiful, and everybody is gaga over them. Why? Because it is the second generation of architects, designers, urban planners who have put them on the pedestal and marked them as heritage on the legacy of the first designers, the original designers. If they hadn't worked on it, they wouldn't be there. So they have been evolving, they have been telling their stories to the world, to the coming generation, and in the past as well. So it is the basically the role of the sort of progressive preservationist. प्रोग्रेसिव प्रिजर्वेशन जो करने में बिलीव करते हैं, ये उनकी वजह से हुआ है कि उन्होंने उसको आगे ले जाने की कोशिश की, उनकी लाइफ को प्रोलॉन्ग किया, उसको खड़े रहने की हिम्मत दी. तो दैट्स व्हाई वी आर फॉर रीअडैप्टेशन, बिकॉज whatever money you are putting into it, you may prolong their life to how many years? But if you keep on using them, you're putting the investment and regenerating the reinvestment money to put in the future. So that's how it works. Now, that's why it is the concept of ecologically sustainable development. We call this term in urban planning ecologically sustainable development. It is with the ecology of the urban planning, and it contributes greatly to the social needs, to the economic needs, to the cultural needs, and of course to the environmental needs. When time and space they get frozen with memories, then we get heritage. Then we get heritage when time and memory with time and space with memory, it merges, it gets frozen with this. We get this built heritage, what we call, which is in front of our eyes now, and it is the stratification, the layering of history in these urban areas, which can be peeled off or which can be seen one after the another, various periods, various eras. That's what this built heritage contributes to the society, that learning experience, the visual experience to the coming generations, and of course to us. Now, socially, now this is basically the identity and the character of the city is just not by these heritage building. It is the pattern of living, how they have lived in that city, that created that sense of place, that sense of character to the that city, and with which we are bound, with which we feel sentimentally attached. And of course, the cultural aspect is that the intangible heritage, the costumes, the cuisines, the way of living, the lifestyle, the pattern that associated with it, it contributes culturally to the society, to the city. Now, the economic part, when we are talking of the economics of the city, it is the tangible, the traditional way of building methods, the whole urban fabric associated with it, the local material, when we use them, the traditional way of building, when we try to regenerate, when we try to build in, as you said, as Dr. Sarkar has said, we generate the whole commerce of the city with it. And that contributes greatly to the city. And lastly, last but not the least, the environmental causes, how it is ecologically sustainable, because as we all know that every building has embodied energy. Embodied energy is the total energy when we say from when the building is being constructed from the start, it's being excavated, the various building building materials are brought in, the investment and the energy you put into building it, and finally it is there for the people to use it. The amount of energy which one building uses, one new building uses, is that embodied energy. Now, when we use these heritage buildings, that part is cut short to what percentage? Can we calculate? A new building takes 49% of the total carbon emissions on the earth, the new building construction. At least 44% of the water refill, 30% of the wood reserve of the forest, and of course the earth fill 10 to 15%. Almost 50% of total carbon emissions on the earth is due to the new construction which is happening around the earth. So if we take that, the embodied energy is sort of saved when we use these heritage buildings and make them readapted to new users. That's the beauty of the readaptation. Now, basically, if why have we come to this point when we need these buildings to be restored or readapted? If we briefly talk about that in the Indian context, in the 75 years of colonial urbanism, when Britishers had come to India, they were building in the cities of India. What was happening? We had medieval towns, the fortified settlements, the artisan settlements. There were already two types of settlements. Then this third, colonial settlements, came, which were little far off from these settlements, and they had different typology, different morphology, different architectural elements which were prevalent in the vernacular architecture of the existing city. Now, the new city had all they had put in all the new infrastructure, the amenities, everything was given to that new settlement, new colonial settlements. And after the Victorian era, the advent of electricity, water supply, so many things were being put in the colonial part. Now we had two cities, one the new shining colonial city and the old medieval city, which was downtrodden, which was almost ignored, and all the new things were put into death. So that call is coming. I think there's some problem. Sorry, I'm taking a call. Hello? Hello?
Carry on, please.
Okay. Sorry for the small confusion, I think. Okay, now that's what it like. Now we had different entities in the same town. There were two worlds. There were two types of worlds, but functioning as one. Now at the moment what we have slums. We have sort of pakka settlements which are unauthorized. We have different settlements of different eras, say colonial, modern, postmodern, whatever, in the same city. Then we have the indigenous town, the original town. And of course, we have so many entities but functioning as one. So the problem lies, how do we deal with this, and can we put the same amount of energy and investment in the same manner in all these parts. So we have to be selective, and here the readaptation comes to put in some amount of effort to these old settlements, these past of ours, which need respect, which need honor, and which is there for a future generation for visual experience, for the studies, for the research purposes, for the documentation. So here the purpose is achieved by readapting these buildings. Now, the
Can you
urban.
please, can you please just cut short little bit? We are just
Okay,
getting out of time,
I'll,
please.
I'll try to do that. Now, if we come to the case study of Lucknow, I'm cutting short the whole thing. The point is ki now that's what I trying to prove the point ki conservation is important, but readaptation is coming on the priority prior to conservation, and if we do that, it will be beneficial for the city. The whole urban fabric is benefited by it. The whole commerce is being uplifted in the society. Now, I may start my a case study which we, as a on behalf of Intact, we had presented the readaptation of a palace, old palace of Lucknow, as a heritage cultural center for the city. And as we all know, Lucknow is just not buildings, it is the intangible heritage, which is also known, and Lucknow is known for all around the world, but Lucknow is not explored to that extent, and it is not encashed rather by the government. And lot of things are here to showcase in terms of cuisine, costumes, music, dance, and we don't have any proper cultural center, or in fact any museum. The museum, existing museum is also redundant, which is not working. So on behalf of Intact, this proposal was put up. Intact, I may sort of elaborate. It is Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, and we had documented almost 250 unprotected buildings of Lucknow, and it has been given to the government. And this palace, to come on to the brief history of this building, this is the building. You can see, I suppose the screen is being seen by all. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you can increase it, it's fine, but it's visible.
Okay. I'll do that.
But please run it fast, please.
Now, this is the building which is in the heart of the city. It is an palace which was built in the period of Saadat Ali Khan. He started the building in early 1800s, and it was finished by the Nawab. Now, this is the final readapted picture of the palace after the readaptation, with how it's going to look. Now, it was a complex of building which had Badi Chhatar Manzil. The Choti is no more. Farhat Baksh Koti, just adjacent to it, and which was built by a French builder by the name of Claude Martin. Then there's one Lal Baradari, Gulista-e-Ram, and Darshan Vilas. What we had at that particular point of time, 2015, presented to the government, just this palace, just this building, the Badi Chhatar Manzil, and we had given the proposal as a heritage and cultural center for the city. Now, this was the whole complex. You can see downwards. It was a big complex. In fact, it was part of the Kesar Bagh Palace by Wajid Ali Shah also. Now, coming to the history, it was a short history. It was built in the memory of Chhatar Kunwar. the mother of Nawab Saadat Ali Khan, in 1814 to 1827 was the period in which it was built, and it was completed by Ghaziuddin Haidar. And a lot of people had stayed in it. In fact, all the begums of that era, the most famous being Malika Kishwar, resided there. And in fact, in the Indian Rebellion of 1857, Havelock, General Havelock, destroyed it. And in fact, after the war, a road was built across it, and all the beautiful structure was is now buried under the door, under the road. And then after the independence was given to American NGO, and afterwards it was as a services, United Services Club for the British officers. And after the independence, in fact, it was converted into CDRI. It was given to the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, to the Government of India. Now, this had a unique features. It was, of course, a three-storied building with 3 basements. It was found, and it was designed by the General Claude Martin, the French builder, who was there first. He served in the French army, then he was with the British, but he was very friendly with the Nawabs, and he had this koti of his, Farhad Baksh Koti, which was named afterwards by the Nawab as his residence. And it had beautiful technically very sound design, which had 3 subterranean levels, and it had moat all around, and the Gomti river was flowing on one side, and it had the access from the river side as well. In the monsoon months, the river water could enter the lower subterranean level and cool the whole building for the summer season. The inhabitant used to change floors. In the summer season, he used to reside in the basement, and in winters on the top floor. It has beautiful Tuscan order pillars, half pillars, and a astrological lab on the top floor. Now,
Vipulji, I'll just please hurry up, please.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, it's going on. Please.
Now, of course, this is what it was, and now coming to the plan of it, we have these. We had given the certain sections in the. There was a food and craft hut along the river. Then, of course, there was an auditorium, then Dastarkhan, and of course, a living heritage museum was also there, an audio-visual interpretation center where the people would be guided for the further tour to the city. And of course, this we can have lot of festivals around the year around in different seasons, like Mango Festival, Bhairavi Utsav for the music, Kitabiyat, Literature Festival, Dastan Goi, Handicrafts Bazaar, then Muharram of Lucknow is very famous. We can have it. And then the boat trail can happen from Kudiya Ghat from one end to this particular palace with all the heritage buildings along the boat trail. So this was the proposal. This is the Dastarkhan with Lucknowi cuisine can be laid out at the river bank. Then this was the jetty from which they can be boarded, that boats can be boarded, and there was a provision for light and sound show also, and that's how it looked. So this is the renovated picture, the perspective view of that palace, and I suppose I've taken a lot of time as Mr.